So yeah, here we are in the last panel of the day, and I'm sure if some of you have been in many of them, your brain must be bursting with amazing ideas and what we can do for the fashion industry to accelerate positive impact. And I want you to join me to welcome an amazing panel of experts and allies in our mission to make our fashion industry better. So my name is Neliana, and I'm the founder of A Transparent Company. And please welcome Frank Michel, Executive Director of ZDHC Foundation, based in Amsterdam. Jerome Rousselot, founder of JITA. He's a great blockchain expert and one of my key points for these geeky questions. And Maria Teresa Pisani, she's from the UN, UNECE specifically, and I will let them give their own introductions. Frank?
Yeah, my name is Frank Michel, and the ZDHC Foundation is based in Amsterdam. So ZDHC stands for Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals, and the organization relates back to a Greenpeace campaign in 2011. And we're the chemical guys. So we are the guys that look into the production and into the process chemistry. So when you try to explain it in an elevator pitch, what does ZDHC do? When you're trying to do organic food and you really try to analyze if the baker around the corner is providing you with organic food, so you do not DNA test every croissant, every baguette that you have in the corner. You go into the baker workshop and you check their ingredients. So what we are doing really, we have a manufacturing restricted substance list, and we ban this from intentional use in the textile and the leather supply chain. And based on this, we are evaluating the products and the performance. And here today, we're looking into the future, what it looks like to move into the product.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jerome Rousselot. I'm the founder of JITA. I've been working in blockchain for 6 years, created JITA 5 years ago. Our mission is to reinvent finance together with our customers, startup, enterprise, and asset managers. So mainly in finance, but with applications to supply chain.
And good afternoon, Maria Teresa Pisani from the United Nations, the Economic Commission for Europe, and based in Geneva, the Palais des Nations. What we do at the UNECE, we develop conventions, policies and standards for economic cooperation and sustainable development. Right now, I'm leading a project for advancing sustainability in the garment and footwear industry with a focus on transparency and traceability of the value chain, as these are definitely key enablers for sustainability in the industry. It's an initiative that we are jointly doing with a wide range of partners. It's funded by the European Union, and we do work with many other UN agencies like the ILO, the ITC, to accelerate action in this specific area, and we'll present more about the project in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I am very excited about having you three here because I'd like to invite you on viewing this panel as Frank represents the MSIs, which is the multi-stakeholder initiatives in our industry in fashion, looking at the environmental impact, but working widely on creating more collaboration. Jerome as the technical expert on the blockchain, looking at our industry and see how we can find those solutions. And Maria Teresa, you're on the global level on seeing how we can avoid duplication of work and actually create a unified solution for our industry. So, and myself, I'm here today because I'm very excited to be presenting some of the key findings and information of a report that we've been working with multi-stakeholder initiatives such as ZDHC on how can blockchain help accelerate positive impact, but through transparency and traceability. I put this slide here because it's 2017 when the new textile report came out by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and it was the first time that the fashion industry were looking at what kind of technologies could help the issues that we have, such as waste, as you know. And so I really like this quote, and actually this was part of a project that I was part of in 2017 when we enabled to trace the first garment on blockchain. So maybe some of you have seen this slide. This was I'm a fashion designer by background, and I understand that the fashion industry, as the state of it, is that we have linear supply chains. They're fragmented. We are working in silos, and therefore there's lack of trust. And the idea when I came upon blockchain, which we will go more in depth, thanks to Jerome, is that could enable that linear thinking and into a circular economy that will incentivize transparency, accountability, give responsibility to each actor of the supply chain, which will enable collaboration. So this is like the bigger picture, and this is how we have bridged this to a more specific approach to the report that we're launching, looking at the state of the fashion industry and how the multi-stakeholder initiatives that hold most of the fashion brands, the mills, the manufacturers, the facilities, the chemical companies come together and actually utilize a solution that could be for the greater good of the industry. And then we're looking in chapter 2 what is blockchain and how the different features such as smart contracts and what's the difference between decentralized ledger technologies could help us. And then the chapter 3 is the gap analysis and what are the recommendations of proposition to move forward. So I just want to give you a brief overview. And we will constantly talk about the 3 T's, which is trust, transparency, and traceability. And I know Frank, you and I have had some conversations and debates as well about, is it traceability first? Is it transparency after? What do we need first? Do we need everything at once? So, could you tell us a bit more about ZDHC and how do you see this work helping enabling your members and the industry?
Thank you, Neliana. A good keyword is transparency and traceability. So our initial conversation was transparency is not really desirable. If you are understanding the view of a big fashion brand and you're disclosing your supply chain, you literally become the yellow pages for your competitor because those facilities are easy to buy from. Does it help the industry to develop more facilities in order to improve the industry performance overall? So, of course, transparency is desirable, but we're looking at traceability. We really want to trace. We want to look at the product level, and how difficult is it to look at the product level? And we'll be discovering a little more what are the enabling technologies. If I want to call you or anyone here in the room, I'm sure you have your mobile phone with you, and you're carrying your mobile phone number, and this is sort of this single point of entry to every of you individuals. But in the supply chain, we don't have a unique facility ID. So what we are looking at, we are really struggling at the moment to have enabling technologies. And then we're looking into blockchain, and that was part of our conversation as well. We just consider blockchain is a buzzword. It does sound really good, and everybody believes we need to do that. And these budgets that we see are sometimes in sustainability, sometimes in marketing departments. We see some of them connected to storytelling, some of them are connected to product compliance or sustainability performance. So a lot of the work already has been done. And our question was, so as ZDHC, we are the chemistry guys. So we look at the overall supply chain, and we are just one of many. We're one of many multi-stakeholder organizations. There are ones that concentrate on sustainable from the environmental perspective. They look at organic cotton. They look at better cotton initiatives. Then you look at the other aspects when you go into social and labor. I think they're all experts, and they have really good data, and they put all their efforts in there to align the industry. So how can we take this excessive knowledge from multi-stakeholder organizations and try to understand what is our role in blockchain and how can we utilize that technology?
So remember when we were discussing how bridging and bringing together the environmental, social impact, governance, and finance could be the way to find one single point of truth. So I'm going to change the slide because that's the one that we discuss a lot about how do we connect the data points and break out from tiers.
Yeah, the tier discussion, and that was in a very early stage in our discussion, was we've been talking about tiers. Everybody in the brands, on the multi-stakeholder organizations, we have been discussing tiers. So we've been traditionally more in tier 3, tier 4. What does that mean? So we're in web processing. We are classically an end-to-end program, which looks from a raw material to the ready-made product. But we just really got caught up in definitions on what do we see. We see vertical suppliers that have all of these production steps. And for us, it was more aligning production steps and related data points. So when we are talking about the communication along the supply chain, blockchain is not really new. We are communicating supply chain information over the last, century. And when you order a product, you do need to have the product name, you have to have the article number, X, Y, Z, and it has been communicated on cardboard. It then went into a more sophisticated UNECE fact, then XML-based, and now we're talking blockchain. We're still talking about the same words, but we need to align the data points. And I think without going into your area, we all come from different areas and from different regions. We speak Italian, we speak German, but we don't speak necessarily the same language when it comes to data. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to bring our expertise as a multi-stakeholder with trusted data that we have from a facility performance into a distributed ledger that is able to communicate across the value chain and is supposed to add an extra value without the data getting lost in translation, without the data what has been heavily invested by the brands is getting lost.
So as part of the conclusion of this brainstorming, we said, okay, this report will focus on moving away from tiers to production steps. And this is where the blockchain comes. And this slide represents each square, a block, technically, and we have identified as raw material, fiber process, manufacturing, and product compliance. And this is where I would like to ask Jerome, how can you tell us what is blockchain? The buzzword, elephant in the room.
So, blockchain is a database technology. It's a way to organize information. And if you look now at how you access information on Twitter, on Facebook, or on your online mobile banking, it's called Web 2.0. You have a graphical interface that looks good, and then you see some data coming from a company. But you don't really know where the data comes from. And inside the company, they have to have lots of manual process to control the quality of this data. It's very sensitive topics these days. Privacy and manipulation of data. And with the blockchain, so currently we use databases that are like a whiteboard, and you can write something and then delete something and rewrite something. And then, so one company is managing one whiteboard, and then your bank is managing another whiteboard, and they all talk to each other. And so it's a database. And blockchain is a new type of database that removes some feature. So once you write on it, then you can't remove it. You have to write something else below. But once someone wrote something, then it cannot be removed, and you can see what happened and when and who did that. And so it's a new technology that limits what you can do in terms of software architecture and data management. And because of this, then you have traceability. You can turn the pages. It's like writing a book instead of in a whiteboard where you can erase. It's on a book, and then you turn the page. It's page 1, 2, 3, 5, and can create something on page 5, and then on page 15 modify it, and page 20 says this doesn't exist anymore. But you didn't delete the line on page 5.
So I really like that analogy because it just makes it more simple to just not get too confused or even intimidated by the blockchain. It's just a new way of recording information in a more secure way. So I have this slide that we did on challenges, benefits and limitations and challenges. It's always good to know as well, what are those limitations? Could you tell us which one will be that you see that is a limiting feature today?
So the limitations of blockchain today. So because it's new, we don't really know how to use it, how to integrate it into larger systems. There are different industries that can all leverage this. When computers were invented, some people thought there would be only the need for 5 computers in the whole world, but now we have a few more. So it's very challenging to adopt these things. And the biggest challenge is cultural, because when you work in an industry, you're used to some process and you don't want to change what works. And you have a business that's profitable, you don't want to change your operations. So it's really hard to invest in that and measure the return because it's not immediate. But what we can see is that it creates transparency, and so it's once it's written there, everybody can see it. So you cannot hide your mistakes anymore. It's a very Orwellian world. So people are not used to that, right? Actually, in reality, people hide things, and then you write something, and then you change something, and you tell something else. So it changes a lot the way you manage data, and transparency in the company is not always enjoyable. But it's going to happen at different pace, in different industries, at different trend.
So speaking about industries, what about the fashion industry? How do you see that bridge? We've seen different case studies happening in the fashion sector, small, medium ones. How do you see blockchain will play a role in the future for helping us create impact, positive impact? So
blockchain for fashion, I think we see many interesting use cases. We see the desire to understand what's happening behind the scene on the production of a product, that every intermediary in the supply chain is responsible for their actions, instead of trusting the brand at the end of the process, as we have today. Now we will be able to see who did what and when. That's supply chain traceability and transparency. The other feature which is connected to this is rewarding people who do more and who are better citizens and meet sustainability goals, environmental goals. So you can create new economic models and reward people for their data, for data production. It's this so-called tokenization. So you create some digital asset and you give it to some people depending on their actions through a smart contract. So it's some logic on the blockchain that says, oh, you did that, you get this. So you can automate micropayments. And then the third aspect, which is already quite popular, is using blockchain for anti-counterfeiting. So for luxury goods especially, or if you are a brand, you design a product, you sell it, and then some other company make fake goods with your brand on it. How does the customer know that they are buying an authentic one? So they can buy the good, scan the code, and see in the app, this is a true product, or this is a fake one.
So you can imagine how many hours me and Jerome have been brainstorming about fashion and blockchain, all the things we can do. So talking about pilots, in our report, we have listed the ones that have happened, including the organic cotton one by Fashion for Good and with CNA and Caring. And I'm sure there's more information that's going to be discussed. But today, since Maria Teresa has joined us all the way from Geneva today, she's going to talk to us about the current pilot that you are developing.
Thank you very much, Neliana. Let me start with this. I mean, that the transparent company and transparency and traceability of value chains is definitely a must-have, let's say, for the fashion industry to embrace sustainability, accelerate action towards responsible production and consumption patterns in line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. That is what we think at the UN, and this is why transparency and traceability is one of the focus of our action for sustainable fashion. Why is that important? Because while on one side, and that is because of increasing consumption trends in the fashion industry, so while on one side this industry is posing increasing risks to the environment, to compliance with fundamental labor rights, on the other side, the value chain of the industry is extremely fragmented and opaque. If you want to accelerate action on sustainability, if you want to make sustainable claims that are solid and reliable, you need to know your value chain. You need to know where the environmental and social risks are happening along the value chain to devise effective actions. Well, this is not yet the case at all. I mean, based on our studies, it's less than 30% of the industry that has some knowledge of its value chain. And most of this 30% only interacts with its immediate suppliers. So very little visibility on the upstream part of the value chain, and especially at the raw material extraction and processing level, where most of the environmental and social impacts are happening. And this is not only in emerging economies, this is also in advanced economies. Even when we talk about compliance with fundamental labor standards, and there are very interesting investigations in this regard that have been recently published. So how do we accelerate on transparency and traceability? How do we help the industry to gain visibility of the value chain and know better the value chain? So as part of our project, we are going to work on 3 key aspects. First of all, the development of a common language about how actors along the value chain interact with each other, and a common language about sustainability. We need to have a common understanding of what sustainability is. So there are a lot of standards out there, a lot of initiatives, a lot of good practices, a lot of good work that has been already done in the industry, how to scale it up, how to harmonize, these efforts, how to make sure that we all speak the same language. And this is where actors like the United Nations, the OECD, the EU come into place. Create a platform and create tools that enable, the establishment of a common language. And these are standards. And as part of the project, this is what we are doing, working and developing a traceability standard, a tool that industry players can use to track and trace their value chain and the entire value chain. This is one action, so a tool. Then you need also the policy and regulatory level. You need to create a sort of level playing field, and you need to make sure that all actors play by the rules, and those that play by the rules get the right incentives and are rewarded for their efforts. If you do sustainability, you need to get rewarded. It has to be a business opportunity. It has to become a business opportunity. And I believe that while in other industries, policymakers and regulators so far have played an important role, this role has been lagging behind in the fashion industry. So it's time to create this level playing field and to make sure that those playing by the rules are rewarded and sustainability is rewarded. So as part of the project, we'll be working on policy recommendations and the regulation model to support those countries and industry players that are going in that direction. And then we want to look at what technology solutions are out there, like blockchain, to reduce the cost of doing traceability and transparency, because it's clear that doing traceability comes to a cost. Exchanging data and information with all the actors along the value chain comes at a cost. But there are solutions out there that can reduce the number of transactions, the exchange of the number of data and information you exchange, can make this exchange effective and reliable. So blockchain seems to be a promising development on that side, in our view, and this is why, as part of the project, we are starting with the pilot for the cotton blockchain, cotton value chain, testing how blockchain can enable exchange of data and information in a standardized, harmonized way from the farm to the shelf looking also at the possibility of circularity approach, because knowing what's happening along the value chain is key also to enable circularity, right?
Absolutely.
To collect and exchange the data and information you need to reuse, to recycle, and so on. As part of the pilot, we are working very closely with partners like ZDHC, brands like Hugo Boss, Stella McCartney, just to mention a few, Vivian Westwood, but also manufacturers. So really bringing all the key actors around the table to develop a proof of concept that can test how effective this solution can be, and then eventually give recommendations for scaling up with other type of fibers and on a larger scale. It is a multi-stakeholder effort. Right now we have more than 150 experts from the industry, from representing all the stakeholders engaging in the project. And it's an open multi-stakeholder platform. So if you're interested to join, just get in touch. Happy to get more experts on board. Thanks.
Thank you. It's so interesting that, and I'm glad and good for us that fashion is an industry that the UN is looking at as a test bed for traceability and transparency. Sometimes fashion seems to be also this very rigorous, secretive, closed industry, but we're opening up more, and I feel like that exchange of knowledge and that community of different expertise coming together, and that's what you're doing as well, gathering expertise to get to the solutions. Yes, these are the slides of the project from the UN and the cotton pilot, and this is the meetings in the reunions we have. So I'm going to go back to this slide because it's sometimes difficult to make things simple. And when we are in an industry as we know it, that is so complex, it's opaque, it's fragmented, there's no knowledge of where things come from, obviously the job of doing transparency and traceability becomes even more difficult. And this is where we need to collaborate. So I'm showing this slide again because it's really important that common language that we all speak from different language industries such as governance or fintech to impact investment, that we find a common language and a purpose. So part of the report is advising on how a multi-stakeholder ledger could help elevate the efforts that many of the actors, from brands to different technology companies, are building, but how do we build them with purpose? How do we align to it? So I'm going to show you now. Imagine when you open the blog, you have more and more information where you have, Maria Teresa just said, keywords like standard harmonization, alignment. The communication of supply chain won't happen if we don't align. So one of the exercises that we've done is to, with the help of Inditex, to go through the viscose supply chain and align those data points. And then this being the first block from raw material, we move then into the fiber process where we have and this is where the chemistry aspect comes into place. So I'm just showing you very quickly because I want you to get a picture of the 4 main blocks that are just the beginning. This is the manufacturing part, and as a fashion designer, I believe also that designers, we have so much responsibility as well when choosing those materials, and this is why we're all here in the Future Fabric Expo, to make sure that we learn about these materials and their impact. And yeah, I cannot stress enough how important that is for then the final product that will need to comply with certain regulations, and the information that we put on those labels that we're communicating to the consumers is extremely important, because that is where we greenwash or we don't. And this is where the blockchain technology can help to verify all these key steps as I'm summarizing here. And hopefully what we can build all together is that multi-stakeholder ledger that we so need to firstly communicate in one language, to standardize, harmonize the standards and align data points. So I'm going to ask each of you any thoughts on these conversations that we're learning from all these discussions and the journey that we've taken, and how do you see each of you with what we're doing in helping accelerate the positive impact in the fashion industry? I'll start with Frank.
Thank you, Neliana. I think when I'm looking in the audience here and I'm looking in the exposition, I'm really impressed by those that work on innovations and that really try to make a difference. And when we look at the multi-stakeholder ledger, some of the questions that I do ask myself, how can you make a difference also in visibility? How can you really demonstrate to the outside, and you use the word greenwashing, without greenwashing, with really based on trusted data, that you do take care of your supply chain, that you do take care of the ingredients, that you do take care of labor that is involved in that process. And the sustainability efforts, and let's call it compliance, need to be more rewarded than those that don't care about anything. I think this multi-stakeholder ledger, this gives us a great opportunity to demonstrate and also to have a future way of communicating to the consumer. Consumer data is essential. I think when we're talking about to kids, my son's 17-year-old, you can't really explain to him that we don't know what's in our products. It's really difficult. We don't know the ingredients of our products. There is no excuse for the future that we do not dive deeper in the transparency. Last but not least, we also want to close the loop. Circular economy, we need to have data in order to be able to recycle, in order to be able to compile the products and maybe even upcycle, which is much nicer than just recycle. And endless opportunities that we have when we really leverage the collaboration here and working from a competitive advantage to a collaborative impact.
Thank you.
I think we are at an interesting time now where we see more and more demand for the features that blockchain can provide in terms of circular economy, transparency, accountability in the production supply chain. At the same time, we see less fear around blockchain and more acceptance of what it is, just a technology, and better understanding of how to use it. More maturity on the technology as well, with technology increasing the privacy, because some things need to be private on a blockchain. Finally, the third aspect, besides demand in fashion and maturity of the technology, is the economic model, which is still emerging, especially in terms of tokens, but we see some models have succeeded, so it's still a time of experimentation, but there are possibilities.
Experimentation and with limited time as well, so we need to accelerate that. Maria?
Yeah, to me, I mean, we need to start from this key question: where are my clothing? Where is my clothing coming from? Yeah. How is it made? And we need to get an answer to this to ask the question and get an answer to this question. So all the work that is happening right now is about providing the tools to enable, to help answering the question and to answering it in a credible, reliable way, because, well, consumers will make that choice if they can also trust the data and information they get. So looking around for solutions and scaling them up in a way that can, support consumers' trust and consumers' choice in that direction is going to be key to accelerate action in the direction of sustainability in the industry. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think the work that you're doing is so important for us in the fashion industry, because we need more legislations, we need more corrective actions, and we also need to compare ourselves on how other industries are advancing perhaps faster, like the cosmetic industry in terms of ingredients in the products, in the food. So why not fashion? Why can't we know what I am wearing today? So I would say for me, I live and breathe trying to accelerate positive impact in the fashion industry, and this is why I'm so sometimes impatient or futuristic about how can new solutions and technologies that are helping other industry help ours. And this is why I'm very happy that this report is one step to help bring the vision of collaboration among multi-stakeholder initiatives across the industry, and how on the government global level we can elevate that and really find a solution. So let's keep working for that. And that people like Jerome, that you understand the world in a different way than us creatives, is interested in helping us find the solutions. And yeah, I'm very happy that we are here to share it with you. And I believe there's some questions or a system for questions, if there are. If not, I will take it from the audience, but I believe there are some questions. Okay, let's see. Is blockchain energy intensive? Is blockchain environmentally friendly? That's for Jerome. Is the UN a bit late for the party making of a tool of HINC index? Well, this is also with the SAC. With the viscose supply chain, how is this offering something different to Canopy? That will be for Frank. He has some answers to that. Why don't we start there? Because there are 3 questions. So, Frank, would you like to discuss with us, sorry, I can't read the question properly. With the viscose supply chain, how is this offering something different if we do the pilot with viscose?
Canopy is a really good example. We are collaborating with Canopy on building some schema on sustainable viscose. We've been building or trying to build the bridge in the sustainable production process in regards of chemistry, and that translates into the viscose production, and how does that reflect to their wastewater treatment? How does that translate into air emissions in that process? And how does that translate to the use of chemistry in a process? And Canopy, we've been working with the dear colleagues from Canopy, and they have been the specialists for wood pulp. And at some point, the question has been rising, so how do we connect that all to a holistic picture and create that transparency from the wood pulp to the ready-made product and even to close the loop? And that is certainly in the blockchain something that helps to bring light into the black box that we have right now. That we have a standard, and that brings us very much to what Maria Teresa said. We need a standard based on which we can benchmark our efforts. And when you look around here and you have people there, they're really struggling to find benchmarks based on which they can show their sustainability efforts. But if we have a very clear framework and say Canopy is wood pulp, ZDHC does the chemistry part, and this bridge in between is responsible production, it does make the work easier for a consumer to identify, it makes it easier for responsible production, and it creates trust and traceability when we have these metrics in place.
Thank you, Frank. I hope that answers the question. Jerome, is blockchain energy intensive? Blockchain, is it environmentally friendly? That is a common question.
Yes, popular question. So currently IT technology firms are migrating to environmentally friendly electricity production. Google, Amazon, Apple, you can research this online. They all have programs to be 100% based from renewables for data centers, and blockchain systems are, the blockchain industry follows the same trends. Currently, so-called mining in blockchain is 70% sourced from renewable energies and going upwards. The second aspect to this question is sometimes the energy market is very strange. You can get electricity at negative prices because there is a lot of wind or a lot of solar energy, and mining is opportunistic actually. So a lot of capacity absorbed is actually already there by this blockchain mining. And third point is there are several ways to secure a blockchain. So some blockchains use a lot of energy, but you don't need, every new blockchain, enterprise blockchain doesn't need its own mining industry. So you can reuse the same fixed cost of securing the network and create 1,000 more bigger amounts of data secured by the same energy. So you have a fixed cost of securing the blockchain, and then if you secure 1 megabyte or 10 gigabytes per second, it's basically the same cost.
Thank you for your answer. The next one is about for Maria Teresa, is the UN a bit late to the party making of a tool when tools such as HIC index are already monitoring of this? Companies have already invested. That's a very good question, actually, for the report, because ZDHC is here and they collaborate with SAC, and this is part of an example of collaboration where there's a tool called the FEM 3.0, and we actually using that as a benchmark to this report. But to the question for you, how do you see that the UN is contributing to connecting the tools, and why?
As I said, I mean, no need to reinvent the wheel, no need to do something that is already existing and working well. And so whatever the UN is doing is actually building upon existing good practices and initiatives like Sustainable Apparel Coalition, that is an industry initiative about monitoring compliance with sustainability requirements. Sustainable Apparel Coalition is partner in our project, so they are part of the project, and certainly the requirements under the IG index are an important element of the transparency and traceability approach that we are developing. So building on that. At the same time, I think the point here is to develop an approach that allows information on compliance with requirements like those included in the IG index to flow through the value chain in an harmonized way, in a way that is understood by all actors along the value chain. So it's not only about monitoring compliance with sustainability requirements at one point in the value chain, but make sure that all the actors along the value chain exchange information on this compliance and talk to each other in a way that is based on a common understanding. So that is the role, the added value of players, global players like the UN or like the OECD, or regional player like the EU, to support scaling up good solutions like IG index or others are available out there. It's plenty of good standards out there that are an important element of the action.
Yeah, absolutely. I just remember something when I was little. I used to always think, can we one day invent a language that everybody can understand? And of course, English is a common one, but then we have the emojis. And in a way, it's like you can communicate so much with that. So it's an interesting analogy on how we can codify that and find a way that in our supply chain, we can actually have a common language, a terminology, and processes that will allow that transparency and traceability we desire. We have 2 minutes, but I'm going to read the bottom one. How do suppliers protect business information while being transparent? As Frank referred to at the beginning. So that has your name.
We're assuming that all information in supply chain are confident. In fact, we are not monitoring the formulation that they're using. We're evaluating formulations based on our lists criteria, and this is done by third parties. So we do ensure that the intellectual property remains. Nevertheless, it needs to be a credible evaluation of these criteria. And when we look into the blockchains, what do we want to put in the blockchain? It's really the performance-related data. And I think that's a really good question, because one point is so evaluating a facility performance on how good they are. Can I buy from that factory or go into the product quality perspective? So we learned when you're using good chemistry, in theory that also leads to a safe product, but in fact it doesn't. So we do have some interlinkages between product compliance and use of good chemistry, and the blockchain does help us to build the bridge in understanding what it takes to improve the product performance along with the environmental performance. And this is for the blockchain technology, and I'm looking into Jerome. There are ways of having parts of the blockchain private, but nevertheless we have the performance-related information out there that helps us to translate facility and product performance.
Exactly, and I think as we go and we learn more about how data sharing will be, how data points can be aligned, how can we avoid duplication, we will learn more about this. But definitely, the privacy. I always say transparency is not lack of privacy. So with that, I want to say thank you, Nina, especially for giving us the space to discuss this topic of blockchain and our study for the fashion industry to increase transparency and traceability. And thank you, everyone, for being here and your questions. And yeah, stay tuned. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.